They tried to take my lake house to save my sister's empire. Then the judge read my name. You came without a lawyer? My sister asked, loud enough for everyone in the courthouse hallway to hear. Mara, this is going to be humiliating. My father smiled beside her. My mother adjusted the diamond clasp on her coat and looked at me as though I were a stain someone had forgotten to remove from the marble floor. Their attorney, Adrian Pike, rested one hand on a rolling cart stacked with binders. You still have time to sign over the property, he said. Once we enter that courtroom, I will make sure you leave with nothing. I held a single gray folder against my side. No, I said. You won't. 10 minutes later, the judge opened that folder, read the first page, and looked directly at Pike. Counsel, she said, Ms. Ellison does not need an attorney. She is one. And based on what I'm reading, you may need criminal counsel before this morning is over. The color vanished from his face. My sister stopped smiling. My father reached for the back of a chair. They had spent 35 years believing I was the family's quiet failure. They thought I processed forms in a windowless office and lived carefully because I had no ambition. They thought my younger sister, Sloane, was the visionary, the future, the one worth protecting at any cost. They never understood that silence was not weakness. And they had no idea that the lawsuit they filed to steal my lake house had opened the door to every secret they had buried. Before I explain how one folder destroyed the illusion my family had built, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And if you have ever had relatives confuse kindness with surrender, you already know why I refused to sign. Chapter 1. The house my grandmother left me. 6 months earlier, I drove north through the first snow of November toward my parents' estate outside Minneapolis. The road curved between bare maple trees and frozen fields, and the sky had the flat gray color that usually meant a storm was coming. I should have turned around. My mother had called 3 times that week to remind me about Thanksgiving dinner. She never called simply because she missed me. Every invitation came with an agenda, and every agenda somehow benefited Sloane. Still, I went. The Ellison house stood behind iron gates at the end of a long circular drive. It was the kind of home designed to communicate success before anyone stepped inside. Limestone walls, tall windows, heated steps, and 2 bronze lions guarding the entrance. My father had bought it when Ellison Senior Living opened its 6th assisted living facility. By the time I arrived, his company operated 22 properties across Minnesota and Wisconsin. My parents treated that growth as proof of his genius. They never mentioned the nurses who worked double shifts, the maintenance crews who kept ancient boilers alive, or the administrators who answered family calls at 2 in the morning. In my father's version of history, he had built everything alone. A valet took my coat even though there were only 6 guests. Sloane was already seated at the dining table, wearing a cream silk dress and a new engagement ring large enough to cast its own reflection on the crystal glasses. At 31, she had perfected the appearance of effortless success. Her hair was smooth, her smile was camera-ready, and her social media showed private dinners, wellness retreats, fashion launches, and airport lounges. What it did not show was profit. Her company, Lumen House, was supposed to be a chain of luxury wellness clubs for wealthy women. The first location occupied a renovated warehouse near the river. It had meditation rooms, infrared saunas, imported stone baths, a tea lounge, and an indoor garden that required a full-time horticultural team. It also had almost no paying members. My father had invested in it 3 times. My mother called those investments supporting a female founder. I called them what they were: rescue payments. Mara, Sloane said as I sat down. You look tired. I fine. You should try our new cellular reset program. It is expensive, but I might be able to give you the family discount. My mother laughed softly. She would never spend money on herself. Mara has always been practical to the point of sadness. My father carved the turkey without looking at me. Practical people are useful. Not everyone is meant to build something. That was how they described my life. Useful, small, safe. As far as they knew, I worked in compliance for a financial services company downtown. They imagined me reviewing checklists, approving expense reports, and correcting other people's mistakes. They never asked for details, and I stopped offering them years ago. The truth was more complicated. I was a licensed attorney and one of 3 managing partners at Northline Recovery and AMP Ethics, a firm that investigated financial misconduct inside healthcare companies, banks, and nonprofit institutions. We traced hidden assets, rebuilt failing organizations, negotiated with regulators, and helped courts protect employees, patients, and creditors when executives had treated a company like a personal bank account. I had argued cases in federal court. I had led a multi-state investigation that recovered more than $400 million for pension funds. I had testified before a Senate subcommittee. My family thought I filed forms. I allowed them to keep thinking it. The first half of dinner passed in the usual way. Sloan described her expansion plans. My mother praised her taste. My father complained about regulators, labor costs, and employees who expected rewards for loyalty instead of performance. Then dessert arrived. The server placed small pear tarts in front of us and left the room. My father set down his fork. The atmosphere changed immediately. "Mara," he said, "we need to resolve a property matter tonight." He opened a leather folder and removed a document. My stomach tightened before he slid it toward me. At the top were the words warranty deed. Below them was the legal description of my lake house near Grand Marais. The house had belonged to my grandmother, June Ellison. It stood on 6 wooded acres above Lake Superior, with a stone fireplace, a cedar porch, and a narrow path leading to the water. When my grandmother's health declined, I was the one who drove her to medical appointments, managed her medications, and spent weekends repairing the house with her. She transferred the property to me 2 years before she died. Not through the family company, not through my father's trust, directly to me. The deed had been prepared by her independent attorney, witnessed, notarized, and recorded with the county. It was the only place I had ever felt completely safe. "What is this?" I asked, though I already understood. "Lumen House is finalizing a new credit facility," my father said. "The lender wants additional collateral. The lake property is unencumbered, so you will transfer it to Ellison Family Holdings. Once Sloan's expansion is stable, we can discuss returning it." Sloan lowered her eyes in a performance of humility. My mother touched her arm. "She is opening 3 locations next year. This is a critical moment." I looked at the deed again. "You want me to give you my house so Sloan can borrow more money?" My father's jaw tightened. "I want you to contribute something meaningful to the family. I paid for the renovations. I pay the taxes. Grandmother gave it to me." "That property was part of the Ellison legacy long before you became involved," he replied. "Your grandmother was confused near the end of her life. We allowed the transfer because it seemed harmless." Allowed. The word settled between us. My mother leaned toward me. "No one is taking anything from you. You can still use the house when Sloan does not need it for retreats." I looked at my sister. "Retreats?" Sloan finally raised her eyes. "The location is perfect for our premium members. We could host private renewal weekends there. It would also be beautiful for the wedding." There it was. My home had already been incorporated into her plans. My father placed a silver pen beside the deed. "Sign it." "No." He stared at me as if I had spoken in another language. My mother's expression hardened. "Do not create drama. I am not signing over my property." Sloane's eyes filled with tears so quickly it would have been impressive if I had not watched her do it since childhood. "I knew you would make this about yourself," she whispered. "Everything is finally coming together for me, and you cannot stand it. You are asking for a house. I am asking for support." My father struck the table with the flat of his hand. The glasses jumped. "This is not a debate," he said. "That property belongs with the family, and I will not let your resentment interfere with a major business transaction." I pushed the deed back across the table. "Then find different collateral." He stood. The room went silent. My father was a large man, broad through the shoulders, with the controlled movements of someone accustomed to others moving out of his way. He walked around the table and stopped behind my chair. "You have always mistaken our patience for weakness," he said. "I paid for the roof over your head, your food, your education. You stopped paying for anything when I turned 18, because you rejected the path I offered. You wanted me to work for you and report to Sloan after she finished college." She understands leadership. She has never met a payroll she did not need you to cover. Sloane gasped. My mother called me cruel. My father bent closer. If you leave without signing, I will challenge your ownership in court, he said quietly. I will argue that your grandmother lacked capacity and that family funds maintained the property. Adrian Pike has already reviewed the claim. Adrian Pike was my father's longtime attorney. He was famous for using money as a weapon, endless motions, broad subpoenas, aggressive depositions, and legal expenses designed to exhaust opponents before facts mattered. My father continued, You may think your salary gives you independence, but litigation is expensive. I can keep you in court for years. You will sell the house eventually, just to pay your own lawyer. My mother said nothing. Sloane watched me with the smallest smile. That smile ended whatever hope I had left that this was a misunderstanding. I stood, folded my napkin, and placed it beside my plate. You are threatening to bankrupt me because I will not finance her business. I am explaining consequences.
No.
You are confirming what I should have understood a long time ago. I picked up my bag. My father blocked the doorway. Think carefully. I have. I stepped around him and walked toward the foyer. Behind me, Sloane said, You will regret this. I put on my coat and opened the front door. Snow had begun falling, soft white flakes disappearing against the dark drive. I don't think I will, I said. Then I left. Chapter 2. The Client File. I waited until I was outside the gates before making the call. Jonah Price answered on the second ring. Jonah was Northline's director of forensic accounting and my closest professional partner. He had spent 12 years investigating healthcare fraud for the federal government before joining our firm. He trusted documents more than people and could reconstruct a conspiracy from 6 months of payroll records and one careless email. You sound angry, he said. My father threatened to sue me for the lake house. There was a pause. Why? To secure financing for Sloane's company. Another pause, longer this time. Mara, there is something you need to know. His tone changed the temperature inside my car. What? We received a confidential engagement yesterday from Halcyon Bank. They are reviewing a refinancing request from Ellison Senior Living. The loan committee flagged irregular transfers to related entities. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Northline was hired to conduct the independent review?
Yes.
The intake team did not realize the connection until the ownership chart reached my desk this afternoon. I was going to call you tomorrow and establish an ethics screen. What kind of irregular transfers? Too early to say, but one of the related entities is Lumen House. Snow swept across the road in silver lines. How much? I asked. At least $11 million over 3 years. My sister had always been reckless. 11 million was not recklessness. It was extraction. I cannot participate without disclosure, I said. I know. Tell Halcyon's general counsel that the controlling family is related to me. Give them the option to terminate the engagement or waive the conflict with independent oversight. I will not access anything until they decide. Understood. And preserve everything already received. That was my next sentence. I drove the rest of the way home through the storm. At midnight, an email arrived from Halcyon's general counsel. The bank had been informed of my relationship to Ellison Senior Living. Because Northline's review team was already independent, and because I had not participated in the original engagement, the bank chose to continue. I would be permitted to advise only on legal strategy and potential retaliation, with all investigative conclusions approved by 2 partners who had no connection to me. That was enough. At 7 the next morning, I entered Northline's headquarters on the 38th floor of a glass tower overlooking the Mississippi River. The receptionist greeted me by name. Analysts stepped aside as I passed. My office occupied the northeast corner, but I went directly to the secure conference room where Jonah had spread the initial records across a long table. The first chart showed money moving from Ellison Senior Living into a construction company called Meridian Concepts. Who owns it? I asked. A registered agent in Nevada. But the banking records lead to Sloane's personal wealth manager. The second chart showed transfers from Meridian Concepts to Lumen House. The third showed payments for Sloane's penthouse lease, private travel, personal chef, vehicles, jewelry, and wedding deposits. My father had not simply invested in her company. He had disguised personal spending as renovation expenses charged to facilities caring for elderly residents. Jonah handed me a stack of invoices. These are supposedly for memory care renovations in Duluth, Rochester, and Madison, he said. The work either never happened or cost a fraction of the amount billed. I examined one invoice for $640,000 in specialized flooring. The vendor address is Sloane's former apartment. Yes. How did Halcyon miss this before? They relied on audited statements from Pike and Amp, Mercer Legal, and a regional accounting firm. The board resolutions appear valid on their face. Appear? Jonah placed two documents side by side. One was a resolution authorizing the transfers. The other was an unrelated board record from the previous year. The signatures were identical down to the smallest pressure mark. Copied and placed digitally, he said. We're sending them for forensic examination. I looked through the remaining pages. The more we read, the worse it became. Resident security deposits had been moved into operating accounts. Employee retirement contributions had been delayed and then replaced with short-term promissory notes. Maintenance budgets had been cut while money flowed to Lumen House. 2 facilities had postponed replacing fire suppression components. A nursing director had warned the board that staffing levels were unsafe. Her report disappeared from the official minutes, and she was terminated 3 weeks later. This is not a bad loan, Jonah said. It is a controlled collapse. I felt something inside me become very still. My father had threatened my home to protect a lie. But the home was no longer the most important issue. Hundreds of residents depended on those facilities. More than 2,000 employees depended on the company for wages and retirement savings. What does Halcyon want? I asked. To know whether it can refinance without inheriting regulatory exposure. It cannot. No. Then the bank needs to freeze the transaction and notify the appropriate agencies. We also need an emergency continuity plan for the facilities. If this becomes public before payroll and medication vendors are protected, residents will suffer first. Jonah nodded. I have already asked restructuring to model a receivership. I looked again at the fake resolution. At the bottom was the signature of Adrian Pike. He had certified that the document was authentic. My father's threat at dinner had not been spontaneous. Pike was already involved. Start a separate file for litigation retaliation, I said. My father said Pike intends to challenge my deed. If they file, every document must be preserved and every representation compared against this record. Jonah studied me. You think they will actually sue? They have never faced a consequence they could not pay someone else to absorb. I picked up the fake board resolution. They are going to sue. Chapter 3. Served in my own lobby. They filed 4 days later. The complaint accused me of exploiting my grandmother, hiding family assets, breaching an alleged fiduciary duty, and fraudulently obtaining the lake house. It demanded that the property be transferred to Ellison Family Holdings and requested an emergency order freezing my bank accounts until I complied. Most of the allegations were fiction. One was particularly dangerous. Pike claimed the house had been maintained with money from an Ellison family trust. To support that claim, he attached a trust schedule listing the property as a company asset. The schedule was dated 18 months before my grandmother died. I had the original version in my files. The lake house was not on it. Someone had added the property later. My family did not merely intend to pressure me. They intended to submit altered evidence to a court. I spent the morning reviewing the complaint with Northline's outside ethics counsel. We created a strict wall between the bank investigation and my personal defense. The independent team would continue tracing the corporate misconduct. I would handle the property case using only records legally available to me as the owner, beneficiary, and defendant. At 11:20, my assistant called. There are 2 women in the lobby asking for you, she said. They refused to give their names. I did not need names. Is security present? Yes. Do not remove them unless they become threatening. I'm coming down. Jonah looked up from the conference table. Do you want me with you? No. Wait 2 minutes, then follow. The main lobby of Northline was quiet and severe. Pale stone floors, dark wood, frosted glass, and a wall of windows facing the river. My mother and Sloane stood near the reception desk, creating enough noise to attract employees from 3 corridors. Sloane was holding a thick envelope. My mother saw me first. "There she is," she announced. "The woman who thinks she can steal from her own family." I approached slowly. "Why are you here?" "To make sure you cannot pretend you were never served." Sloane pushed the envelope against my chest. Several employees stopped walking. My mother raised her voice. "You should also know that Mara may be involved in a serious property fraud. Her employer deserves to understand the type of person handling its paperwork." They still thought I was an analyst. I could have corrected them. I could have pointed to my name etched beneath the Northline logo in the executive directory. I could have introduced them to the attorneys, former regulators, and forensic specialists who reported to me. Instead, I looked down at the envelope. "What do you want?" Sloane smiled. "Sign the deed, withdraw your opposition, and the lawsuit disappears. You filed it this morning, and we can end it this afternoon." My mother stepped closer. "Your father is giving you one final opportunity to behave like family. By surrendering the house. By correcting a mistake your grandmother made while she was ill." I looked directly at her. Grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. My mother's face sharpened. "You manipulated a dying woman." The sentence struck harder than I expected. I had sat beside my grandmother through nights when pain kept her awake. I had washed her hair when she could no longer stand. I had listened as she told me stories she had never trusted anyone else to hear. My parents visited when photographers were present or when estate decisions were discussed. I kept my voice level. "You should leave." Sloane turned toward the receptionist. "I want to speak to her manager." The receptionist's eyes moved briefly to me. I gave the smallest nod. Before anyone answered, Jonah entered the lobby. He wore a dark suit, carried a tablet, and looked exactly like what my family expected power to look like. Older than me, male, expensive, impatient. "Mara," he said sharply, "why is a personal dispute disrupting the office?" My sister's expression brightened. "Are you responsible for her?" she asked. Jonah looked at her. "I am a senior director." "Who are you?" "Sloane Ellison, Mara's sister. Your employee has stolen a valuable family property and is forcing us into court. She is dishonest, unstable, and probably using company time to plan her defense." My mother added, "We thought management should know before her behavior damages your reputation." Jonah turned toward me with practiced disappointment. "Is there pending litigation?" "Yes," I said quietly. "And you brought it into the office?" "They came here." He sighed. "Return upstairs. Do not access client systems until we review the situation." I lowered my eyes. "Understood." Sloane's smile widened. Jonah faced them again. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Security will escort you out." My mother looked satisfied. "I hope the firm takes integrity seriously." "More seriously than you can imagine," Jonah said. They did not hear the meaning beneath the words. As Sloane passed me, she leaned close enough for only me to hear. "You should have signed a dinner. Now you may lose your job and the house." Then she walked out beside my mother, triumphant. The glass doors closed behind them. For 3 seconds, no one spoke. Then the receptionist covered her mouth to hide a laugh. Jonah handed me the envelope. "I hate to criticize a managing partner in public, but your performance was convincing." "Too convincing?" "One of the new analysts looked ready to defend you." I glanced toward the hallway. A young associate immediately looked away. Securities Chief, Daniel Cho, approached. "Do you want trespass notices issued?"
"Not yet."
"Preserve the lobby footage and audio." Daniel nodded. I opened the envelope. Inside was the complaint, a proposed restraining order, and a handwritten note from my father. 48 hours. Sign or lose everything. Jonah read it over my shoulder. "They came here to frighten you." "No," I said. "They came here because humiliating me is part of the reward." I folded the note and placed it in the evidence sleeve. And now they have done it on camera. Chapter 4. The woman they called confused. My grandmother had anticipated trouble. 2 weeks before transferring the lake house, She asked me to meet her at the office of Ruth Calder, an estate attorney in Duluth. Ruth was 70 at the time, with silver hair, bright eyes, and a habit of reading every page twice before allowing anyone to sign. My grandmother sat beside me in a blue wool coat, her hands resting on a cane. "Your father believes everything with the Ellison name belongs to him," she said. "It does not." I told her I did not want family conflict. "You cannot prevent conflict by giving unreasonable people everything they demand," she replied. "You only teach them to demand more." Ruth conducted a private capacity interview with my grandmother. A physician had examined her the same week. The transfer was filmed, witnessed by two people who had no relationship to me, and recorded with the county. At the time, I thought the precautions were excessive. Now, they were the reason my father's case would fail. I drove to Duluth the morning after being served. Ruth's office overlooked the harbor. She greeted me with a long look and no surprise. "Victor finally challenged the deed," she said. "You expected it?" "June expected it." She led me into a conference room and opened a fireproof cabinet. Inside was a sealed archive box labeled June Ellison, Real Property Transfer. The box contained the original deed, medical capacity evaluations, witness affidavits, bank records showing that my grandmother, not the family trust, paid the house expenses until the transfer, and letters explaining her decision. Ruth handed me one envelope. My name was written across the front in my grandmother's careful handwriting. I opened it. "Mara, if you are reading this with Ruth, your father has probably decided that my wishes matter less than his convenience. Do not give him the house to keep the peace. There will be no peace. There will only be the next demand. You are the only person in this family who sat with me when there was nothing to gain. The house is yours because you loved it, cared for it, and understood what it meant. It is not a reward. It is a refuge. Do not let anyone shame you for protecting what was freely given. Love, Grandma June." I read the letter twice. Then Ruth placed another document on the table. "This is the trust schedule attached to the last amendment June signed," she said. "Compare it with the exhibit Pike filed." The typeface was slightly different. The page numbers did not align. The altered version listed my lake house and carried a photocopied signature. "Can you prove the filed exhibit is false?" I asked. "Easily. My electronic record system timestamps every final document. The original was digitally sealed. I also have correspondence from Pike asking about the property 6 months after the trust amendment. He would not have asked if it were already listed." "You kept the emails?" Ruth looked offended. "I am an estate lawyer." For the first time in days, I smiled. She reached into the box again. "There is more." 3 months before June died, Pike visited her at the rehabilitation center without telling me. He brought a proposed amendment transferring voting control of Ellison family holdings to Victor. June refused to sign. She called me immediately afterward. Did she document it? Audio and written statement. My father's current lawsuit was not an isolated act. It was a second attempt to rewrite my grandmother's estate. Ruth studied my face. "You are deciding how far to take this." "Yes." "Then remember something. Protecting yourself is not revenge. Presenting evidence is not cruelty. Your father made choices. Adrian Pike made choices. The court will decide what those choices mean." I closed the archive box. "Will you testify?" "I have been waiting 6 years." Chapter 5. A business built on empty rooms. While I prepared the property defense, Northline's independent team continued the Halcyon review. Every day brought a new discovery. Lumen House had reported 12,000 active members. The real number was 814. It claimed to employ 140 wellness specialists. 53 names belonged to people who had never worked there. Payroll was routed into accounts controlled by shell companies. It claimed to have completed renovations at 7 senior living facilities. For projects existed only in photographs copied from design websites. Sloan had used Ellison senior living funds to lease a private aircraft, purchase art for her penthouse, and pay a public relations agency to secure magazine profiles calling her a self-made entrepreneur. My father approved nearly every transfer. Pike's office prepared the contracts. What about my mother? I asked Jonah during a late meeting. She is not signing corporate documents, he said. But a foundation she controls received almost $2 million in transfers. Most of it paid for galas, club dues, and donations that purchased social access. She knew the money was coming from the company. We have emails showing she asked the controller to classify a country club renovation as a resident enrichment program. I closed my eyes for a moment. The cruelty was not only financial. At the Rochester facility, a memory care wing had delayed replacing a malfunctioning alarm system because funds were unavailable. The same week, Lumen House spent $300,000 on imported marble for a lobby. At the Madison facility, kitchen staff reported spoiled refrigeration units. The replacement request was denied. Sloan's company billed that facility for a non-existent sensory nutrition redesign. My sister's lifestyle had been financed by people who could not always remember their own names. Halcyon withdrew the refinancing proposal and notified state and federal regulators. Under legal privilege, Northline helped create a continuity plan. A court-appointed receiver would be requested if the company could not prove it could operate safely. My father still did not know. He believed the bank was completing routine due diligence. His attention remained fixed on me. 3 days before the first court hearing, he called. "You can end this," he said. "I did not start it. Sign the deed, and Pike will dismiss the case. You submitted a false trust schedule." The silence lasted half a second too long. "I have no idea what you are talking about. The version attached to your complaint is not the version grandmother signed. You are not qualified to interpret estate documents. I am qualified to recognize a page that did not exist." His voice lowered. "Be careful, Mara. Accusing an attorney of misconduct can have consequences. So can committing it." He hung up. That evening, I received an invitation to Sloan's engagement gala at the Marquette Hotel. The card was heavy, ivory, and embossed in gold. My name appeared beneath the words "Family of the Bride." At the bottom, my mother had written a note. "Attendance expected. Do not embarrass us." I almost declined. Then Jonah called with new information. "We found a series of messages between Pike and your father discussing the lawsuit," he said. "They are in the corporate email archive provided to Halcyon under the engagement agreement. Can I see them? Not for your personal case unless Halcyon authorizes disclosure or they are produced through discovery." "Then I do not see them." One message references a meeting at the Marquette during Sloan's gala. Pike plans to have Victor sign replacement board certifications there. For what purpose? To make the false transfers appear retroactively authorized. I looked at the invitation. Will the bank seek an emergency preservation order? Counsel is drafting it now. Then I am going to the gala. Why? Because my sister invited me to a crime scene. Chapter 6: The Toast. The Marquette ballroom glittered with borrowed wealth. White flowers climbed the columns. A string orchestra played beneath a ceiling painted with clouds. Waiters carried champagne through a crowd of investors, physicians, politicians, and society donors. Sloan stood at the center of it all in a silver dress, accepting compliments as though she had built the hotel herself. Her fiancé, Carter Wren, came from a family that owned a chain of medical supply companies. He was polished, well-connected, and nearly as impressed with himself as Sloan was. I wore a simple black dress and arrived alone. My mother noticed me near the entrance. "You came," she said, sounding disappointed that I had obeyed. "You said attendance was expected." She examined my dress. "At least you did not wear one of your office suits." My father approached with Pike beside him. Pike smiled. "Have you reconsidered our proposal?"
No.
"Then enjoy the evening. It may be your last invitation to an event like this." He walked away before I could answer. "Carter found me at the bar. Sloan told me about the lake house," he said. "It is unfortunate that family property has become a legal issue." "It is my property. That is what courts are for." He ordered another drink. "Sloan wants to hold the wedding there," he continued. "The photographs would be extraordinary. I assume you will be reasonable once the judge explains the situation." "You assume a great deal." He laughed. "Sloan says you work in compliance."
I do.
"That must be difficult. Spending all day enforcing rules created by more important people." Sometimes the rules become important when people ignore them. He did not understand the warning. At 9, Sloane stepped onto the stage and tapped a champagne glass with a spoon. The room quieted. She thanked the guests, praised Carter, praised my parents, praised herself through several indirect references to courage and vision, and then looked toward me. "There is one more announcement," she said. My mother turned in my direction with a satisfied expression. Sloane continued. "Carter and I have chosen the location for our wedding weekend. We will celebrate at the Ellison family lake house on Lake Superior, a property that is finally being restored to its rightful purpose." A few guests glanced at me. Sloane smiled into the microphone. "Unfortunately, one relative has confused temporary possession with ownership. But our attorneys are handling the misunderstanding." There was uncomfortable laughter. My father lifted his glass. My mother waited for me to leave. I did not. I raised my own glass of water and applauded. Slowly. Sloane's smile faltered. She had expected tears or anger. My calm unsettled her more than any confrontation could have. After the applause faded, I walked out of the ballroom. Pike followed me into the corridor. "Mara." I stopped. He held a folded deed in one hand. "Your father is prepared to be generous," he said. "Sign tonight, and the family will allow you to use the guest cottage twice a year." The family will allow me to visit my own house? For the moment, the title remains disputed. No. The title is recorded. Your dispute is manufactured. His smile disappeared. You are playing a dangerous game. I can subpoena your employer, freeze your accounts, and examine every transaction you have made for the last decade. Your quiet little career will not survive that kind of scrutiny. I looked at him carefully. Are you threatening retaliation because I refuse to transfer property to your client? I am explaining litigation reality. That phrase must be popular in your office. He stepped closer. Sign. I could smell whiskey on his breath. Behind him, at the far end of the corridor, two men in dark suits entered a private meeting room. One was Halcyon's outside counsel. The other was an investigator from the state attorney general's office. They carried an emergency preservation order signed less than an hour earlier. Pike did not notice. I lowered my voice. Before you threaten me again, you should ask whether the replacement board resolutions in that room are already subject to a preservation order. His expression changed. What did you say? You heard me. His eyes moved toward the private room. The door opened. Halcyon's lawyer stepped into the corridor with a uniformed process server. Mr. Pike, she called. You have been served with an order requiring immediate preservation of all records related to Ellison Senior Living, Lumen House, Meridian Concepts, and the Ellison Family Trust. Pike stood perfectly still. The process server handed him the documents. He read the first page. His face lost color. My father emerged from the ballroom behind us. What is this? He demanded. Pike did not answer. I looked at my father. The rules created by more important people, I said, have arrived. Then I left the hotel. Chapter 7. The morning after the gala. At 6:15 the next morning, someone began pounding on my apartment door. I had expected the visit. The preservation order had frozen destruction, not money. My father could still operate temporarily, but he now knew that regulators, lenders, and investigators were looking at the same records he had spent years hiding. He had only one asset he believed he could convert quickly. My house. Mara, he shouted from the hallway. Open the door. I set my phone on the kitchen counter and activated the recording application. The jurisdiction allowed one-party consent, and my outside counsel had instructed me to document every contact. Then I opened the door. My father pushed inside. He was still wearing the shirt from the gala. His tie hung loose, his eyes were red, and the confidence that usually surrounded him had cracked around the edges. What did you do? He demanded. I attended Sloane's party. Do not play games. Halcyon suspended the refinancing. The Attorney General is demanding records. Our bank placed restrictions on outgoing transfers. I did not falsify your records. You knew they were coming. I knew you were trying to create replacement board resolutions. His face tightened. Pike said you threatened him. Asked whether he understood the preservation order. My father walked into the living room and turned back toward me. For several seconds, he looked less like a parent than a chief executive evaluating a failing negotiation. Then his voice softened. Mara, we have both said things we regret. I do not regret refusing to sign. This is bigger than a house now. The company employs thousands of people. Residents depend on us. If Halcyon walks away, the consequences could be severe. The consequences were created when you diverted money from those residents. You do not understand corporate finance. I understand fake invoices. He stared at me. I let the silence remain. My father tried a different approach. Sloane's company experienced temporary losses. I moved capital between related entities. That happens every day. Did you move resident security deposits? His eyes flickered.
Who told you that?
Did you delay employee retirement contributions? Those funds were never at risk. Did you pay for last night's gala through Meridian Concepts? His mouth opened, then closed. The frightened part of him disappeared. Anger replaced it. You have been snooping through confidential records.
No.
Your lender hired independent investigators. He laughed once, without humor. Independent. Of course. He walked closer. I came here to offer you a way out. Sign the lake house over to the family holding company today. I can use it to secure emergency credit while Pike challenges the preservation order. In return, I will dismiss the lawsuit and make sure your involvement in this investigation is never mentioned. You are offering not to retaliate if I surrender my property. I am offering to protect you. From you. His expression hardened completely. You have always needed to feel morally superior, he said. Even as a child, you watched everyone as if you were collecting evidence. Sloane lived. You judged. Sloane spent money. Other people paid. She knows how to create relationships. She brings value into a room. You bring suspicion. And that makes her worth $11 million? He froze. I had not intended to reveal the number, but the damage was useful. He now understood the review was deeper than he had hoped. His voice dropped. You have no idea what is required to preserve a family legacy. Stealing from employees is not preservation. Do not use that word. What word would you prefer? He struck the kitchen counter with his fist. Enough. The sound echoed through the apartment. You will sign the deed, he said. You will withdraw every accusation, and you will tell Halcyon this review is based on a personal vendetta.
No.
I can still destroy you. With what? My attorneys. My relationships. My name. Your attorney is under a preservation order. Your bank has suspended the loan, and your name is attached to altered records. For the first time in my life, my father looked uncertain in my presence. It lasted only a second. Then he stepped close enough that I could see the broken blood vessels in his eyes. You think this makes you important, he whispered. You think because you found a few documents you suddenly matter? Sloane will always be the daughter people remember. She has charm, beauty, and a future. You are useful only when you clean up the damage. That is what you have always been, the lesser daughter who handles the mess. The words should have hurt. Years earlier, they would have. Now they sounded like evidence. So, the house's payment for cleaning up her damage? I asked. It is your obligation. Because I am the lesser daughter. Yes. He said it without hesitation. I looked at the phone on the counter. Its screen was dark, but the recording continued. My father followed my glance. What is that? My phone. Are you recording me? I am documenting a threat related to pending litigation. He lunged toward the counter. I stepped between him and the phone. Leave. His face changed from rage to calculation. You would use a private family conversation in court? You came into my home and demanded property in exchange for ending a lawsuit. I am your father. That is not a legal defense. He backed away slowly. At the door, he turned. Pike will tear you apart tomorrow. No, I said. He will not. My father left. I locked the door, stopped the recording, and uploaded it directly to counsel's evidence portal. Then I listened to one section again. You are useful only when you clean up the damage. For most of my life, he had been right. I had cleaned up quietly, protected reputations, absorbed insults, and mistaken endurance for loyalty. Tomorrow would be different. Chapter 8. What my family never asked. The court hearing was scheduled for 9 on Monday morning. Sunday evening, I assembled the folder. The original deed went first. Behind it, I placed my grandmother's capacity evaluations, the video certification, Ruth Calder's affidavit, property tax records, renovation receipts, and proof that no family trust had paid for the house. Next came the original trust schedule and the altered version Pike had filed. A forensic document examiner had already issued a preliminary declaration. The disputed page used a printer manufactured 2 years after the date printed on the document. The signature image had been copied from a different trust amendment. Then came correspondence showing Pike had asked Ruth about the house long after the supposed schedule had listed it as a trust asset. Finally, I added the lobby recording, my father's handwritten threat, the apartment recording, and the emergency preservation order. The bank investigation itself remained protected and separate. I did not need it to defeat the property claim. My family had created enough evidence on their own. At the front of the folder was my notice of appearance. Mara June Ellison, attorney at law. Minnesota, bar number. Federal admissions. Managing partner, Northline Recovery and AMP, ethics. My family could have learned the truth in less than a minute. My professional biography was public. My name appeared on court opinions, conference programs, regulatory reports, and law school lectures. They never searched. They had decided who I was when I was 18 and treated every year after that as irrelevant. Jonah stood in my office doorway while I closed the folder. "You could bring outside counsel," he said. "I have outside counsel advising on ethics and the parallel investigation." "That is not what I mean." "I know." He entered and sat across from me. "You do not need to prove anything by standing alone." "I am not standing alone. Ruth will testify. Halcyon's counsel is monitoring. The record is complete. You know what they will do in the hallway." "Yes." "They will try to reduce you to the role they created." "Yes." "Then why give them the opportunity?" I considered the question. "Because I spent years avoiding conflict so they would not be cruel," I said. "They were cruel anyway. Tomorrow I want to walk into that courtroom as myself. Not the daughter they assigned. Not the employee they imagined. Myself." Jonah nodded. "Then take the good pen." He placed a black fountain pen on the desk. I laughed despite everything. At 7 the next morning, I drove north one final time before court. The lake house was silent beneath fresh snow. Lake Superior stretched to the horizon, dark blue under a pale sky. I stood on the cedar porch and read my grandmother's letter again. "Do not give him the house to keep the peace. There will be no peace. There will only be the next demand." I folded the letter and placed it inside my coat. Then I locked the door and drove back to Minneapolis. Chapter 9. 1 cart of binders, 1 gray folder. The courthouse hallway was crowded when I arrived. Pike stood beside a metal cart stacked with black binders. 2 associates organized tabs while my father, mother, and sister waited near the courtroom doors. Sloane saw me first. Her gaze moved from my face to the empty space beside me. "You actually came alone," she said. My mother looked almost pleased. "We told you to hire someone." "I did not need to." Pike stepped forward. He had recovered some of his confidence since the gala, but not all of it. The skin beneath his eyes was gray, and he kept checking his phone. "The preservation order is unrelated to this property dispute," he said. "Do not imagine it gives you leverage." "I do not need leverage. I have title. You have a deed obtained from an impaired woman." My father smiled. "Sign now, Mara. We can tell the judge the family resolved the misunderstanding."
No.
Sloane folded her arms. "Then this is going to be humiliating." "That depends on whom you ask." She laughed. A bailiff opened the doors. Inside, Pike's team filled the plaintiff's table. The binders landed with heavy thuds. My father sat directly behind them with my mother and Sloane. I took the defense table alone and placed the gray folder in front of me. At 9, Judge Elena Ward entered. Everyone rose. Judge Ward had served on the bench for nearly 15 years. Before that, she had been a commercial litigator and a federal prosecutor. I had argued before her twice, both times on complex receivership matters. Whether she remembered me did not matter. The record would. She reviewed the case caption, then looked toward the plaintiff's table. Mr. Pike, you filed the emergency motion? Yes, Your Honor. This is a straightforward matter involving exploitation of an elderly settler and concealment of family property.
Straightforward motion rarely arrive en quart.
A few people in the gallery smiled. Pike did not. Judge Ward turned toward me. Ms. Ellison, there is no attorney listed for the defense. Are you requesting time to obtain counsel? Behind me, Sloane whispered something to my mother. I heard them laugh. I stood. No, Your Honor. I am appearing on my own behalf. The judge looked at the empty chair beside me. This dispute includes trust law, capacity allegations, emergency injunctive relief, and claims of fiduciary misconduct. Self-representation would be unwise. Pike rose quickly. We agree, Your Honor. The defendant appears not to understand the seriousness. I did not ask for your agreement, Mr. Pike. He sat. I opened the folder. Your Honor, may I provide my notice of appearance and supporting motion? The bailiff carried the documents to the bench. Judge Ward read the first page. Her expression changed. She looked at me again. Ms. Ellison, you are licensed counsel? Yes, Your Honor. Managing partner at Northline Recovery and AMP. Ethics? Yes. The courtroom became completely quiet. Judge Ward turned to Pike. Counsel, Ms. Ellison does not need an attorney. She is one. Sloane stopped moving. My mother leaned toward my father. What did she say? Judge Ward continued reading. Her eyes moved from my notice of appearance to the executive summary of my motion. Then she looked at Pike again. And based on the exhibits identified here, you may need criminal counsel before this morning is over. Pike's hand slipped from the edge of the table. A pen rolled onto the floor. My father stood halfway. What is going on? Sit down, the bailiff said. Pike picked up the summary sheet. His eyes moved rapidly across the page. This is outrageous, he said. These allegations are retaliatory and irrelevant. Then you should have no difficulty addressing them, Judge Ward replied. I moved to the lectern. Your Honor, I ask the court to deny the emergency injunction, dismiss the complaint with prejudice, impose sanctions for fraud on the court, preserve the disputed originals, and refer the matter to the appropriate disciplinary and investigative authorities.
Pike stood again.
Fraud on the court? There is no basis. The trust schedule attached to the complaint was not part of any instrument signed by June Ellison, I said. The page was created after her death, printed on equipment that did not exist on the stated date, and inserted into a photocopied document. The signature was digitally reproduced. My father looked at Pike. Pike did not look back. I handed the original trust schedule to the bailiff. Ruth Calder, the drafting attorney, is present and prepared to testify. The original electronic file is digitally sealed and time-stamped. The county records confirm the lake house was transferred directly to me while June Ellison was competent, represented independently, and medically evaluated. Ruth stood in the gallery. Judge Ward compared the documents. Mr. Pike, did you review the original before filing this exhibit? Pike cleared his throat. My client provided the family records. That was not my question. I relied on my client's representation. My father's face darkened. Adrian, you prepared it. Pike turned sharply. Do not speak. The exchange lasted only seconds, but it changed everything. Judge Ward noticed. So did the court reporter. I continued. The complaint also alleges family trust payments maintained the property. Attached bank records show all expenses were paid by June Ellison before transfer and by me afterward. No trust funds were used. I submitted the letters and receipts. The plaintiff further claims immediate harm requiring an injunction. Yet the only urgency appears in a handwritten demand from Victor Ellison threatening to bankrupt me unless I transferred the house within 48 hours. The bailiff delivered the note. My father shifted in his seat. Judge Ward read it. Did you write this, Mr. Ellison? Pike stood. My client should not respond without advice. The judge looked at him. That may be the first prudent statement you have made today. I then introduced the lobby footage and the recording from my apartment. Pike objected. Judge Ward allowed a short excerpt for the limited purpose of evaluating coercion and the request for equitable relief. My father's voice filled the courtroom. You will sign the deed. You will withdraw every accusation, and you will tell Halsey this review is based on a personal vendetta. Then another section. Sloane will always be the daughter people remember. You are useful only when you clean up the damage. And finally, it is your obligation. You are the lesser daughter. My mother covered her mouth. Sloane stared at my father, not because his cruelty shocked her, but because he had admitted the financial motive allowed. Judge Ward stopped the recording. No further excerpt is necessary. Pike tried to recover. Your Honor, even if the conversation was unpleasant, it does not resolve the trust issue. The trust issue appears to be resolved by the original trust, the judge said. The remaining issue is why your filing contains a different document. Pike's voice became smaller. I request a recess. Denied for the moment. Judge Ward examined the preservation order from the Halcyon matter. This order references potential alteration of board and trust records involving the same parties and counsel. Ms. Ellison, are you personally involved in that investigation? I disclosed my relationship and was screened from the factual review, Your Honor. I have not used protected bank material in this defense. The order is offered only to show an existing judicial directive to preserve originals and prevent further alteration. Judge Ward nodded. That distinction is important. She looked at Pike. Where is the original of the trust schedule you filed? Pike hesitated. I believe my client has it. My father stood again. You told me your office had it. Mr. Ellison. Pike snapped, sit down. The judge's expression became cold. Both of you will stop speaking over this court. The disputed document will be surrendered today. No original, copy, device, email, or storage location related to it may be altered or destroyed. She paused. Emergency relief is denied. The complaint is dismissed with prejudice as to the property claim. The deed remains with Ms. Ellison. Sloane made a choking sound. My mother whispered, No. Judge Ward was not finished. The court finds a substantial preliminary basis to believe a fabricated document was submitted. I am scheduling a sanctions hearing, referring the filing to the lawyer's professional responsibility board and transmitting the record to the county attorney and state attorney general. Mr. Pike, you are ordered not to contact Ms. Ellison except through independent counsel.
Pike sat down slowly.
My father's hands gripped the bench in front of him. Judge Ward looked at me. Ms. Ellison, the court recognizes that you have separated your personal defense from the related institutional investigation. Maintain that separation. Yes, Your Honor. One more matter. Your grandmother's letter is not necessary to establish title, but I read it. She appears to have understood the family dynamic clearly. My throat tightened. Thank you, Your Honor. The judge struck the gavel once.
Court was adjourned.
My family had entered expecting to take my home. They left under orders to preserve evidence of their own fraud. Chapter 10. The hallway after the verdict. The moment we stepped into the courthouse hallway, my family surrounded me. My father reached me first. What did you do? He demanded. The question was almost identical to the one he had shouted in my apartment, but the power behind it was gone. He could not order the judge to reverse the ruling. He could not force Pike to erase the court record. He could not intimidate the bailiff standing 10 feet away. I defended my property, I said. You destroyed this family over a cabin. You filed a false document over a cabin. My mother pushed between us. How could you hide your career from us?
Il serre derrière.
Hide it. You let us believe you were an office clerk. You never asked what I did. We asked where you worked, and I told you. You said compliance. I investigate corporate misconduct and argue the consequences in court. That is compliance. Sloane's face was rigid with fury. You made us look like fools.
No.
You came to my office, insulted me in front of my employees, lied about theft, and demanded that my manager fire me. I simply did not interrupt. Her eyes widened. The people in that lobby knew? All of them. The realization struck more deeply than the ruling. Sloane had believed humiliation was a performance staged for an audience beneath her. Learning that the audience understood the truth made her expression collapse. My mother whispered, "That man who disciplined you, Jonah, is my partner. And the security staff? My employees." Sloane looked physically ill. My father recovered first. "If you are so powerful, you can fix this," he said. "Call Halcyon. Tell them the review is unnecessary. Explain that the transfers were a family dispute. I cannot interfere with an independent investigation." "You can." "I will not." His voice dropped. "Think about the residents." "I have thought about them more in the last month than you have in 3 years." Pike emerged from the courtroom behind them. He no longer carried himself like a man billing by the hour. One of his associates had taken the binders. He held only a phone and the court order. My father turned on him. "You said the trust schedule would survive review." Pike looked toward the nearby bailiff. "Not here. You created it. I advised you not to discuss anything. You told me Ruth Calder's file could be discredited." Pike's eyes flashed with panic. "Victor, stop talking." My father stepped closer. "Do not order me around after what happened in there." They were beginning to turn on each other exactly as people do when a shared lie becomes more expensive than shared loyalty. I walked away. "Mara," my mother called. I stopped near the elevator. For one moment, she looked less angry than frightened. "What happens now?" she asked. "The court investigates the false filing. Regulators investigate the company. Independent professionals protect the residents and employees. And us. That depends on what you did." The elevator doors opened. Sloane pushed past my father and came toward me. "You are enjoying this."
No.
"You have always hated me. I spent years protecting you from consequences." "That was not love. It was participation." Her face twisted. "You think you are better than me because you have a title?"
No.
"I think I am no longer responsible for saving you." I entered the elevator. The doors closed on all 4 of them standing beneath the courthouse lights, finally unable to agree on whom to blame. Chapter 11. The Receiver. The corporate crisis accelerated within 48 hours. Halcyon Bank formally terminated the refinancing. State healthcare regulators issued emergency inspection orders. The Department of Labor opened an inquiry into delayed retirement contributions. The Attorney General sought temporary control of certain accounts to prevent further transfers. My father responded by calling the investigation politically motivated. He sent an email to senior employees claiming hostile outside actors were attempting to steal a healthy family company. The problem was that the company was not healthy. Without new credit, Ellison Senior Living could not cover payroll, medication suppliers, utilities, food contracts, insurance premiums, and debt payments at the same time. Its available cash would last 9 days. A judge appointed a temporary receiver. Because Northline had completed much of the independent review, the court asked our firm to support the receiver's team. I disclosed the conflict again and remained excluded from operational decisions involving my family. Jonah led the work. He called me from a facility in Rochester. "The residents are stable," he said. "We secured emergency vendor agreements and released payroll." "What about the retirement accounts?" "Contributions were short by $6.4 million. The receiver froze distributions to insiders and recovered $3 million from accounts linked to Meridian Concepts. We are pursuing the rest." "And Lumen House?" "Close." Sloane had arrived at the flagship location that morning to find a court notice on the door. Employees were allowed inside only to collect personal items. The indoor garden lights were off. The marble lobby was dark. The expensive treatment rooms had never produced enough income to cover 1 month of rent. Her social media team posted a statement blaming an internal family betrayal. The comments were less sympathetic than she expected. Former employees described unpaid wages. Vendors posted invoices. A wellness coach revealed that Sloane had instructed staff to create fake membership profiles before investor presentations. Carter Wren removed their engagement photographs from his account that evening. 3 days later, his family's attorney announced that the wedding was postponed indefinitely. Sloane called me 27 times. I did not answer. She left messages that moved through every emotional strategy she knew. First came rage. You jealous, vindictive liar. You planned this because you could never stand to see me happy. Then bargaining. We can work something out. I will give you a percentage of the new company if you help reopen Lumen House. Then childhood nostalgia. Remember when we built a fort in Grandma's basement? We used to be close. Mom says you have forgotten who you are. Then desperation. Carter will leave me if this is not fixed. Dad is blaming me. Please call. I saved the messages for counsel and said nothing. My mother chose a different tactic. She appeared at the lake house. I saw her vehicle through the front window one Saturday morning. Snow covered the drive, and she stood outside in an expensive coat unsuited for the cold. I considered not opening the door. Then I remembered my grandmother's letter and stepped onto the porch. My mother looked past me into the house. I have not been here since June died, she said. That was your choice. She flinched. I came to talk, not fight. Then talk. She folded her gloved hands. Your father has made mistakes. That is a small word for fraud. He believed he was protecting the company. He protected Sloane's image. My mother looked toward the lake. You do not understand what it is like to build a life around someone and discover it may disappear. I understand exactly what it is like to have people threaten to take your home. Her eyes filled with tears. We may lose the estate. The estate was pledged as collateral years ago. I did not know. You signed foundation transfers and asked the controller to disguise club expenses. Her head snapped toward me. How do you know that? The receiver's filings are public. She looked away. That was different. The foundation introduced donors to the facilities. The foundation paid for your status. I supported your father. That is what a wife does. And what does a mother do? The question stopped her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Wind moved through the pine trees, and waves struck the rocks below the bluff. Finally, she said, I came to ask whether we could stay here temporarily if the estate is taken. There it was. Not an apology. Not concern for what they had done. Another request for my property. No, I said. Her face hardened with familiar speed. You have 6 acres and 4 bedrooms. This is my home. We are your parents. You tried to steal it. Your father was desperate, and you helped him. She stepped closer. You would leave your own mother without a place to live? You own jewelry, art, vehicles, and a condominium in Florida. Sell them. Her mouth tightened. Your grandmother poisoned you against us.
No.
She taught me that a boundary without consequences is only a request. My mother looked through the window again. This house should have stayed in the family. It did. I went inside and closed the door. She stood on the porch for another minute before walking back to her car. I expected guilt. Instead, I felt quiet. Chapter 12. The Last Bargains. 2 weeks after the receivership began, Adrian Pike asked to meet with me. The request came through his new attorney, not directly. Judge Ward's order prohibited him from contacting me, and for once he followed a rule exactly. His attorney proposed a conference at Northline with my personal counsel present. Pike claimed he had information that could resolve several misunderstandings involving the trust document and Ellison Senior Living. There were no misunderstandings. There were only facts he wanted to exchange for protection. We met in a small conference room with no view. I chose it deliberately. Pike had spent his career using expensive spaces, polished tables, and armies of assistants to make other people feel insignificant. Here, there were 4 chairs, a camera, a clock, and a box of tissues no one touched. Pike looked 10 years older than he had at the gala. His suit was still tailored, but the confidence had drained out of it. He sat beside his attorney and kept both hands flat on the table. My counsel began the recording.
Pike spoke first.
Victor Ellison misled me about the origin of the trust schedule. I said nothing. He represented that the page came from an older family archive. My counsel asked, "Did you create the page?" Pike looked at me instead of answering. I facilitated the reconstruction of a document my client believed reflected June Ellison's intent. "Did you create it?" My counsel repeated. "Yes." The word was quiet. Did you know June Ellison had never signed it? Pike rubbed one thumb against the other. I knew the signature was reproduced. Did you submit it to the court as an authentic trust record? Yes. He inhaled slowly. Victor insisted that the property had always been intended for family use. He said Mara manipulated June during her illness. I believed correcting the schedule would restore the estate plan. You were June's former attorney, I said. You knew she had independent counsel. You knew she refused your proposed amendment. His eyes dropped. I made an error in judgment.
No.
An error is citing the wrong case. You manufactured evidence. His attorney intervened. We are not here to debate terminology. Mr. Pike is prepared to provide complete cooperation concerning Victor Ellison's conduct. In exchange for what? My counsel asked. A joint statement that Ms. Ellison does not oppose a negotiated disciplinary resolution. I almost admired the structure of the request. Pike wanted to trade my father for the possibility of keeping some fragment of his own professional life. What information? I asked. Pike opened a folder. He had preserved copies of private instructions from my father, records of transfers, drafts of false board resolutions, and memoranda explaining how to hide related party payments from lenders. He also had messages from Sloan requesting that personal expenses be routed through Meridian Concepts. The material was valuable. It was also evidence he was already legally required to surrender. You are offering documents covered by the preservation order, I said. I am offering context. You are offering compliance with a court order as though it were generosity. His face tightened. Mara, your father placed enormous pressure on everyone around him. You charged him $1,200 an hour to withstand pressure. I made choices I regret. So, did the employees whose retirement contributions disappeared? That was Victor's decision. You created the entities. I was counsel. I did not control the money. You designed the pipes, and now you want credit because someone else opened the valve. Pike finally looked angry. You think you are different from me because your clients call your work ethical recovery. You dismantle companies. You force sales. You put executives out of work. We do it under court supervision to protect people executives harmed. You still profit. Yes, I said. Being paid does not erase the difference between restoring stolen pension funds and helping a client steal them. The room went quiet. Pike's attorney closed the folder. Is that a refusal? My position is simple. Mr. Pike should provide every document, tell the complete truth, and accept whatever decision the disciplinary board and prosecutors make. I will not ask for greater punishment. I will not ask for less. Pike stared at me. I could help send your father to prison. You already helped him commit the crimes. His face became pale. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. As Pike reached the door, he turned back. Did you plan all of this from Thanksgiving?
No.
You expect me to believe the investigation, the court filing, the receivership, all of it just happened? I planned to defend my home. Your records revealed the rest. He studied me as if that answer were more frightening than a conspiracy. People like Pike understood revenge. Revenge would have allowed him to imagine that I was simply another version of him, using law as a weapon for personal satisfaction. Accountability gave him nowhere to hide. 3 days later, Sloan came to Northline. This time, she did not scream in the lobby. She sat alone on a bench near reception, wearing jeans, a wool coat, and no visible jewelry except her engagement ring. The ring looked out of place now, like a stage prop after the theater had emptied. Daniel called my office. She says she will wait all day. Has she threatened anyone?
No.
Send her to conference room 7. Keep the door open and remain nearby. When I entered, Sloan was studying the framed cases on the wall. Each plaque described a recovery: hospital pension assets, charitable funds, employee wages, elder care restitution. At the center was a photograph of Northline's partners. My name was beneath it. She turned toward me. How long? She asked. How long what? How long have you been a partner here? 7 years. And a lawyer? 14. She gave a short, broken laugh. I told everyone you sorted mail. You told yourself that. You could have corrected me. You would have called me a liar. She looked down at the table. Carter ended the engagement. I heard. His family says being connected to me creates regulatory risk. I am sorry it ended that way. No, you are not. I am sorry you are in pain. That does not mean I believe Carter should ignore fraud. Her eyes filled. I did not know Dad was taking money from residents. You submitted invoices to the facilities. He told me they were internal allocations. You created vendors that did not exist. My finance consultant handled the paperwork. You approved payments to your own accounts. Her voice rose. Because Dad said the company would reimburse Lumen House for brand development. Did brand development include your penthouse? She looked away. Everyone uses company benefits. Not everyone invents construction projects at care facilities. Sloane pressed both palms against the table. You do not understand what it was like. I almost laughed at the reversal. What was it like? Dad expected me to succeed. Every room I entered, he had already told people I was brilliant. Every launch had to be bigger. Every interview had to make me look unstoppable. When Lumen House began losing money, I could not admit it. He would send more. Mom would arrange another event. Carter would introduce another investor. I kept thinking the next location would fix everything. For the first time, she sounded less like an actress and more like a person. Why did you come? I asked. She took a breath. The prosecutors offered a meeting. My attorney says cooperation could matter. It could. They want me to explain Dad's role and Pike's role. Then tell the truth. If I do, Dad will never forgive me. He asked you to submit fake invoices and allowed you to become the public face of the fraud. What exactly are you protecting? He is still our father. That did not stop him from blaming you after the receiver arrived. Her eyes lifted sharply. How do you know? His public statement says unauthorized executives misused funds. You were the only executive at Lumen House. She looked as though she had been struck. He said the lawyers wrote that. Of course he did. Sloane began to cry. Not the instant, controlled tears she had used at dinner. These were uneven and embarrassing. She covered her face with both hands. I did not move closer. After a while, she said, I need you to help me. What does help mean? Talk to the prosecutors. Tell them Dad controlled everything. Tell them I was manipulated. I will not make statements I cannot support. You know what he is like.
Yes.
I also know what you did. Her sadness hardened. So, you will let me go to prison. I do not control the sentence. You control everything.
No.
That is the story our family tells whenever consequences appear. Someone powerful must be choosing them. Sometimes consequences are simply the result of documents, witnesses, and decisions. She stood. You always wanted this moment.
No.
You wanted me to lose. I wanted you to stop taking from me. That is the same thing. It is not. She picked up her bag. At the doorway, she paused. What should I do? It was the first honest question she had asked me in years. Tell your attorney everything, I said. Return what you can. Stop blaming the people who found the records. Apologize to the employees you used. Accept that telling the truth may not protect you from punishment. And then, build whatever life remains without asking someone else to finance the illusion. She left without another word. Later, I learned that she attended the prosecutor meeting and produced access to 2 accounts investigators had not yet found. It did not erase what she had done, but it helped recover money. It was the first useful choice she made after the collapse. Chapter 13. What happened to them? The investigations lasted nearly a year. The public learned the story in pieces. First came the forged board resolutions. Then the fake construction invoices. Then the diverted resident deposits, delayed retirement contributions, and personal spending charged to care facilities. Pike resigned from his firm before the disciplinary board could suspend him. It did not help. His former partners produced internal records showing he had created shell entities, instructed staff to alter document dates, and certified signatures he knew were copied. He eventually pleaded guilty to conspiracy, obstruction, and wire fraud. His law license was revoked permanently. My father fought longer. He blamed Pike, then Sloane, then his controller, then the economic climate. He insisted he had intended to repay every account. Prosecutors responded with emails in which he wrote that employees would never understand the balance sheet anyway, and that resident deposits were idle money. He accepted a plea only after the court ruled those emails admissible. He was sentenced to federal prison and ordered to surrender most of his remaining personal assets for restitution. The sentence did not make me happy. It made the facts final. Sloan was charged separately for false invoices, payroll fraud, and money laundering through Meridian Concepts. Because she cooperated late, returned certain assets, and had no prior convictions, she received a shorter sentence followed by supervised release. She blamed me during her allocution. The judge interrupted her. "Your sister did not submit fake invoices," he said. "You did." That sentence was quoted in every article about the case. Carter married someone else the following spring. My mother was not criminally charged with the central conspiracy, but she entered a civil settlement requiring her to return foundation funds and sell several assets. The estate was sold. The country club canceled her membership. The invitation stopped. For years, she had measured value by access to rooms filled with wealthy people. When the money disappeared, so did the relationships. She moved into the Florida condominium she once used for winter weekends. She wrote me letters. The first accused me of abandoning the family. The second described her loneliness. The third contained something close to an apology, though it still included the sentence, "We all made mistakes." I did not respond. An apology that distributes guilt equally is often another demand. Forgive me without requiring me to name what I did. I was not ready. Maybe I never would be. Ellison Senior Living survived, but not under the Ellison name. The receiver sold the facilities to a nonprofit healthcare group with strict staffing and governance requirements. Insider properties were liquidated. Meridian accounts were recovered. Insurance settlements and asset sales restored the employee retirement shortfall in full. The nursing director, who had been fired after warning the board, was rehired as chief quality officer. The Rochester fire alarm system was replaced. The Madison kitchen received new refrigeration units. Resident deposits were moved into protected accounts. Jonah sent me the final restructuring report late on a Friday afternoon. At the bottom, beneath hundreds of pages of numbers, was one line. No resident was displaced as a result of the receivership. That mattered more to me than every headline about my family. Chapter 14. The House Remains. The following summer, I renovated the old boathouse below the lake property. Not for Lumen House retreats. Not for a wedding designed around photographs. I converted it into a small seasonal residence for recipients of the June Ellison Public Interest Fellowship, a program Northline created for young attorneys and accountants working on elder care protection, employee benefit recovery, and nonprofit fraud. The first fellow arrived in June. Her name was Priya, and she was researching financial abuse inside guardianship systems. She stood on the porch with 2 suitcases and looked toward the water. "This is where I get to work?" she asked. "For 3 months. It is beautiful." My grandmother thought so. I gave her the key. The main house remained mine alone. I kept my grandmother's blue wool coat in the hall closet. Her letters stayed in a wooden box near the fireplace. On difficult days, I read the one she had written for the lawsuit she knew would come. "Do not give him the house to keep the peace." She had understood something I learned too late. Peace purchased through self-erasure is not peace. It is a temporary pause before the next extraction. A year after the court hearing, I returned to Judge Ward's courtroom for an unrelated receivership case. I represented a group of hospital employees whose retirement plan had been mismanaged. When the hearing ended, the judge looked over her glasses. "Ms. Ellison." "Yes, Your Honor." "How is the lake house?" "Still standing." "Good." That was all. Outside the courthouse, sunlight reflected from the windows of the surrounding buildings. People hurried across the plaza carrying files, coffee, children, and pieces of lives no one else could fully understand. Jonah waited near the steps. "We won," he asked. "We obtained the preservation order." "That means yes in your language." We walked toward the office. My phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. For a second, I thought it might be Sloan or my mother using another account. It was from a former employee of Ellison Senior Living. "Ms. Ellison, you do not know me." I drove maintenance vans for your father's company for 19 years. I received the final restoration payment to my retirement account today. My wife and I thought we had lost everything. Thank you for helping the receiver protect us. I stopped on the sidewalk.
Jonah looked at me.
Everything all right? I handed him the phone. He read the message and returned it.
That is why we did it, he said.
Yes. Not to win a family argument. Not to prove I was smarter than Sloane. Not to watch my father fall. We did it because people with power had treated other lives as disposable, and someone finally documented the cost. That evening I drove north. The lake was calm when I arrived. I carried a mug of coffee onto the porch and sat in my grandmother's old chair. The sky faded from gold to violet above the water. My life was quieter now. There were no mandatory holiday dinners. No calls demanding money. No performances in which I was assigned the role of failure so Sloane could feel successful. For a long time, I thought losing my family would feel like standing alone. It did not. It felt like discovering how much space fear had occupied. My family had believed power was the ability to frighten people, purchase silence, and force someone weaker to carry the consequences of your choices. My grandmother understood power differently. Power was a clear record, a locked door, a refusal spoken once and enforced afterward, a home that remained yours because you did not surrender it to people who called theft a family obligation. The lawsuit was never truly about a lake house. It was about whether I would accept the identity they had created for me, the lesser daughter, the invisible worker, the person whose labor and property existed to repair Sloane's mistakes. The answer was no. I did not destroy my family. I stopped protecting them from the truth. They mocked me for arriving at court without a lawyer because they had never cared enough to learn that I was one. They brought a cart of binders because they believed volume could replace facts. They trusted an expensive attorney because they assumed money could turn a forged page into history. All I brought was one folder. Inside it was a deed, a record, a voice, and the truth. That was enough. If this story means anything, let it be this. Being related to someone does not give them ownership of your work, your home, your future, or your peace. Help given freely is generosity. Help extracted through threats is exploitation. And a boundary is not cruel simply because the person benefiting from your lack of one becomes angry. The lake house remained on the bluff above Superior. The cedar porch weathered another winter. The waves kept striking the rocks below. And every morning I woke there, I remembered that the quiet daughter they underestimated had not needed to become cruel to survive. She only needed to stop surrendering. If you have ever had to protect yourself from people who use the word family as a weapon, share your experience in the comments. And subscribe for more stories about people who were underestimated, pushed too far, and finally chose themselves.